Up and at 'em, Nashy Poo, Yulk whispered in a mockingly paternal tone. I sat up and glared at him, making certain that my distaste for his antics was apparent on my face. I hate being woken up by Yulk. If it isn't his relentless mocking that I wake up to, it's a prank. My brother's affinity for magic makes his pranks all the more infuriating. He's one of the only people that can easily use ice in his antics. Fuck you, I grumbled as I started wrapping up my bedroll. Thankfully, the current environment had him on what amounts to his best behavior. I glanced around. Everyone else was already awake and packing up. Nick was already packed, a sign of uneasy sleep. Makes sense, this mission has pretty high stakes for the boy. No matter which way this goes, it has the potential to be emotionally taxing. If we don't find anything, he's going to feel stuck and unsure of what to do next. If we do find something, there's a decent chance that it'll be useless to his plans of getting home. Even if we find him a way home, though, he's going to have to say goodbye to his new family. I can't say I know exactly how he feels, but I'm guessing it's going to suck no matter what. Come on, Nash, Yulk broke character. We've got to get a move on. It wouldn't do for either of us to cause a delay. Yeah. How come you can't just wake me up like a normal person? I asked, knowing the answer already. There's no fun in that, Yulk replied with a grin. Whatever, I sighed as I finished packing my gear. Some of the others were eating breakfast, but I didn't join them because I'm not a breakfast person. It drives my mom nuts, but it's just not my thing. Feeling full right after waking up makes me lazy for the rest of the day, so I prefer to snack if I get too hungry before lunch. I slipped a pack of breakfast jerky in my pocket to snack on while we walked. Finish up, everybody. We're burning daylight, Yehisith commanded. Obligatory grumbling followed, including quips about daylight being irrelevant in a dungeon, but everyone was marching soon after. People outside the business hear someone described as a professional adventurer, and imagine someone with manners who can take down monsters. In actuality, this was the professional side of adventuring. What needs to get done gets done, but hardly anyone gives any regard to manners. The trip to the hidden passage was spent in silence. Tensions rose the further we had to walk. After another 30 minutes of walking, I was worried we were going to have to start cracking walls to find the hidden passage again. But we finally saw the light from the passage and the tension eased up some. It was still pretty thick, though, for one very good reason. I hope that barrier held up, Nick voiced everyone's concern. The breach of silence caused all eyes to turn on the boy. I expected him to wilt under the combined gaze of the adventurers, but he didn't. Thunra chuckled at the unintentional audacity. We'll check it before beginning our investigation, but until we confirm its integrity, we'll want the element of surprise, Matri said softly. That's a polite way of saying, shut the fuck up, Thunra laughed. Oh, right, Nick replied. Quiet chuckles came from the other adventurers before the silence settled in again. We continued on for another few hours before we came to the fork in the path, and then another couple of hours before we came to the barrier. The bright purple glow was a welcome sight, but what lay beyond it was another story. The only light down the rest of the passage was from the barrier itself. There were deep gashes in the walls and ceiling, as if something went absolutely berserk trying to get through. The thing had even tried to dig below the barrier. Jesus, Nick whispered. It's a good thing the barrier goes below the ground. 40 feet in each direction, to be exact, Gino added. That's the maximum it can go, and that's what the barrier team used. Interesting, Nick replied as he walked over to one of the walls and ran his hand over a brick. It must have been hard to damage these walls. These bricks feel tough and there's no mortar lines. What are these made out of? Looks like bronze, I answered, but they're too perfect. Matri finished my sentence. No pits, dents, or anything that you would normally see even in polished bronze. Also, I've never seen bronze flake quite like that. She pointed to the rubble on the other side of the barrier. I looked closer, and she was right. Some of the claw marks ended in what looked like string, and pieces that had fallen off had a shape closer to shaved wax than shredded metal. I walked up next to Nick and tapped the wall. The rapport was strange as well. It sounded like a dull thud instead of a metallic ring. Nick drew his sword and swung at the wall. The rest of us stared at him in disbelief, shocked by the suddenness in which he had acted. Then we were shocked by the results. Not a single dent showed in the bricks he had struck. He switched hands and shook the hand that had been holding the sword. "Damn it, boy," I shouted. "Don't be swinging your sword for no reason." "It wasn't for no reason, Nash," he replied. "I hit that wall hard and didn't leave even a scratch. I thought it might be made out of a thing called plastic, but I've never seen plastic that can stand up to steel before." Plastic? I turned to look at the bronze-colored bricks again. Then I looked back at the rubble and my blood ran cold as the implications set in. I looked at the over-20s and saw the steel in their eyes. This confirmed that the monster's going to be one that even they have to take seriously. Then something else occurred to me and my blood started running hot again. "Let me see your sword," I growled at Nick. He cautiously held it up to me hilt first. I snatched it from him and flipped it blade side up. Just as I thought, the damn thing was notched beyond the point of a whetstone. "You absolute fucking idiot," I spat at him. "Look what you did to your sword." "Shit," came his reply. "Shit? That's your response? You're going to need to have this repaired. You'd better fucking hope that we don't run into anything that you need to fight," I yelled as I pushed the sword back into his hands. "You're right, my bad," he said with regret in his voice. "Just use your magic," Yulk chuckled, diffusing my anger a bit. "Or we could do some of that unarmed melee training now if you'd like," Thunra added with a grin. "Whatever," I grumbled. "Just don't do shit like that again. Your equipment is your lifeline. You're lucky you have more than one, but never take that for granted. Some things don't give a shit that you can do magic, you know." Nick glanced at Yulk and back to me. Then he nodded his understanding, and after a moment of cold glaring, I relented. With a sigh and a shake of my head, I turned away from him and looked at the barrier. Arcane glyphs swam peacefully across its surface, completely oblivious to the destruction laying just beyond it. I wondered for a moment where the monster had gone when Yisith cleared her throat. "The barrier's in place. Let's get moving. We've got intel to gather," she ordered. She was met with several nods, and we all began backtracking down the passage. Nick had a dejected expression the entire journey to the labyrinth portion of the passage, which made me feel a pang of guilt. Was I too hard on him? Was there a better way that I could have handled that? Maybe, but Nick's actions had been damned foolish, so he deserved a little embarrassment. Sure, in certain situations, a calm and collected explanation is the best way to go. But when the situation's dangerous, you should have some emotion involved, right? To really hammer the point home? I glanced down at Nick and a terrible thought occurred to me. I'm massive compared to the boy. Did I scare him? I quickly recalled all of our recent interactions and realized that I've been harsher than I probably should have. I knew why, too. My father was a great Mer. He taught me that satisfaction with your progress leads to complacency, and complacency is the most dangerous foe to an adventurer. I wouldn't have gotten as far as I have as fast as I have without him, and I shudder to think what level Yulk would be if Dad had been around to train him. He had two different personalities that he switched between. The first was a happy-go-lucky Mer who did silly things to make us laugh and cheered us up when we were sad about things. The second was his training personality, which was cold, calculating, and harsh. He never hit me, but I would have preferred that to some of the ways he explained my failings to me. I almost laughed as I realized that I had been emulating him. I wonder if he'd be proud of that. I glanced down at the boy again and realized that I need to change tack. I grew up in an emotionally sound environment, and had been well prepared to suffer the barbs of my father's training. I don't know how Nick grew up, but recent events had to be traumatizing to the poor boy. If I'm not careful, he might have a mental break. Fuck. I gritted my teeth and swallowed my pride. "Nick," I whispered. "Yeah?" "I shouldn't have yelled at you back there." "I'm sorry," I apologized. "It was harsh of me and you didn't deserve that. I'll do better moving forward." "Oh, okay, thanks," Nick replied with a very confused expression. I debated explaining further, but decided to drop it as we reached the first turn. "All right, Nash. Where are we going?" Yishith asked. Left is a dead end, I answered. I kept my left hand on the wall and just walked. We can save 10 minutes or so by doing the same thing and skipping this left turn. I took the lead and traced our path. About an hour later, we reached our destination. A large, spacious room with mirrored walls and several broken altar-looking things. It looked almost the same as the last time I saw it, the only exception being that Nick wasn't on one of the altars. The altar that he had been on wasn't lit up like it had been either. This is where I found him, I told Yisith, on the only intact altar thingy. It was lit up at the time, but the lights turned off once I picked him up. A few seconds later, I was teleported to the entrance. Okay, there's only one entrance, so you'll hang out with Thunra on guard duty. The rest of us will have a look around for clues. I nodded and everyone spread out. Thunra came up beside me and leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. He stared out into the empty hallway, so I watched the others wander around the room. The altars were a mess. Some of them looked as if they had crumbled over time, but others looked as if they had been intentionally broken. Some even had jagged glass jutting up from their sides. I turned around and started eavesdropping. I can't read this, Gino mumbled. I'm not the only one. Nice. Do you recognize this text, Nick? Yulk asked. No, came the reply. If we don't recognize it, that means it's likely Drakon, Anyalish, or Daimoon, Gino said. Or perhaps it's an ancient lost language. Well, that's a problem. It's not like there are a ton of scholars who study Anyalish or Daimon, and Draken was abandoned in favor of Elvish script. Gonna be tough to get this translated, Yulk sighed. I've grabbed a rubbing just in case. Is something wrong? Nick? What's going on? I turned back in alarm and watched as Nick lay back onto the altar I had found him on. Yulk reached for him as glass suddenly sprang up around the boy and lights began flashing all over the altar. I rushed over. What the hell? I demanded as I looked over the altar. What did you let him do that for? I didn't let him. He just did it. Didn't breathe a single word. Just climbed right on. Or in, I suppose, Yulk explained. Do you see a way to open this thing? There wasn't even a seam in the glass that was now surrounding Nick. I grabbed my axe and swung it sideways so that I wouldn't chop the boy like a log, and was shocked as my axe bounced back without so much as chipping the glass. I stared at my axe in disbelief. It was missing 3 teeth. Shit, I whispered. Tenzingos diesel loading. Error 11310317X. Repairing hardware. Error 7984. Replying Nanpak. Okay. Repairing hardware. Okay. Reconfiguring hardware. Okay. Rebooting. Okay. Tenzingos.isoloadin. Okay. I'm awake. Am I functional? Checking OSPAXA. Okay. Checking base function. Okay. Checking sensor package. Okay. Checking hardware. Okay. Checking ThompPack. Okay. Checking local K-base. Okay. I feel horizontal. Subject is laying down. Why can't I see? Subject's eyes are closed. Sleeping. Is there anyone else out there? Checking communications. Failure C technician. Checking database. Failure C technician. Oh. Trapped in a sleeping subject with no idea why. Scanning my knowledge base hardly answers any questions either. Okay, what do I know? I know I'm an artificial intelligence. My function is to guide a subject in the use of thaumaturgy. And I've got all sorts of information on spells. I'm also supposed to translate all audio for the subject and provide further guidance on diplomatic interactions. Who made me? No clue. Who's the subject? It's a human named Subject Zero. That's a cool name. What's my name? Tenzing. I don't get it. I must be missing context. Will Subject Zero make fun of me for not having a numerical name? Or worse, will it be jealous of my non-numerical name? Cool, a new feeling. Panic, nice. Ah, but a solution presents itself so quickly. I don't get to enjoy my newfound emotion. I'll just go by 10. Then we'll both have numerical names. Oh, that's a pun, 10, like binary. It's funny because I'm a machine and binary is a machine language. I'll introduce myself as 10 when the subject wakes up. I wonder if it will get the joke. I also wonder when the subject will wake up. K-Base says humans may sleep for up to 8 hours at a time. That's a long time. At least there's data on vital functions, bone density, and many other things to keep me occupied. Nothing on history or temperament, though. So, what is a human anyway? an omnivorous bipedal two-armed mammal with an endoskeleton and complicated cardiovascular and nervous systems. The nervous system appears to be where I reside. I detect some pain signals, but the brain is ignoring them. Is it because it's asleep? I need to awaken the subject to find out. Can I move limbs? No. Damn. I can increase heart rate a little, though, and decrease it. That might come in handy. Let's see. Salivary glands, various hormonal glands, sudoriferous glands. I can make the subject sweat. Will that wake it up? Oh, these things can also hear. I haven't checked that. Huh. Dull, non-rhythmic thuds. Maybe someone is trying to wake the subject up already. Does that mean that the subject is asleep unwillingly? Why? Wait, where are we? Oh, a fixer casket. Yeah, that makes sense. Explains my sudden awakening and the pain signals. Stupid 10, get a hold of yourself already. All right, connect to the needle in the skull and... Many of the subject's neurons suddenly began to light up. The needle detected this and withdrew before I could fully connect. I tried to decipher the various meanings of the neurons manually before I realized that I could just apply the translator protocol to them. This somewhat worked and allowed me to determine two things. The subject is waking up and sitting up. Didn't have to wait all that long after all. Nick, are you all right? I heard something ask. I'm okay, said the subject. What the hell did you do that for? A different voice demanded. What do you mean? We were talking about the text and next thing I know I'm on this thing. What happened? I heard that with his ears and saw his brain move the tongue and vocal cords while exhaling. Then I discovered that there's an interface for interacting with the subject. I can say hello. Hello, Subject Zero, I thought to the subject. Oh, shit, he replied verbally. The voice just said hi. Did it say anything else? Another voice asked. It called me Subject Zero. Confusing. It called me the voice, implying an ignorance of my existence. Is the subject experiencing amnesia? Or perhaps the subject wasn't made aware of my installation? Strange. I don't know the particulars of the installation procedure, but if I understand my location and the anatomy of a human correctly, it had to be quite invasive. I am 10, your personal AI guide. And apparently its name is 10. It's an AI, the subject explained. What's an AI? What is it talking to? Oh, eyes, right. There we go. Large humanoid creatures with green skin and sharp teeth. Orcs. Enemies? Enemies? But why is the subject friendly with them? Is the subject under duress? Heart rate and blood pressure indicate otherwise. Wait. Why are orcs enemies in the first place? I don't know. Okay, well, I can change that portion of the K-base. You can talk to me directly, you know, I informed the subject. Well, that's good to know, 10, but if I make a habit of talking to you, it will just make me look crazy. The subject verbalized. Crazy? Mental illness? Oh, I see. I suppose my communications may seem like auditory hallucinations. Actually, that's exactly what they are, technically speaking. So if the subject interacts with me, it would look like schizophrenia. Easy solution. You don't need to verbalize to speak to me, I explained. I'm in your head, so all you have to do is think. Wasazdf oklas of TSDs, he attempted to reply. I recalibrated some of the translation protocols. My mistake, try again. Like this? He asked. Exactly, now it won't look like you have schizophrenia when we communicate, I gleefully replied. Nick, what's going on? The orc with an axe asked with concern in its voice. There's a machine in my head and it's talking to me, Subject Zero explained. Other than that, I know less than you do. I decided to keep quiet while I recalibrated my sensor package. The orcs and the subject continued talking to each other, but the orcs kept calling Subject Zero by the name of Nick. Was the subject named erroneously? Or are the orcs mistaken? Maybe the subject is undercover for some reason. I'll have to clarify that later. As I continued calibrating certain functions, I felt myself spread through the various connections in his body. The artificial magic core and pathways were functioning correctly. Still some pain in the injection sites, but I was able to numb that for him. Simple matter of telling certain nerves to hush. 10? Subject Zero or maybe Nick asked. How can I help you? I answered. What are you exactly? As I said before, I am an artificial intelligence. Right, I meant why are you in my head? I don't know. Today is my first day of existence as far as I am aware. My primary function is to guide subjects through the use of thaumaturgy. This implies that you were in need of guidance, I suppose. What's thaumaturgy? A literal translation would be wonderworking. It's the practical application of arcane arts using ethereal energies, I explained. Magic? I suppose so, yes. Okay, it says that it's supposed to guide me through using magic. Oh, wait, hold on, he verbalized. You said primary function. What are your secondary functions, he thought to me. I have several, I answered with a bit of hesitation. If the subject doesn't know why I'm in his head, he might not like my functions very much. My active secondary functions are translation, cardiopulmonary regulation, neural tissue regulation, medical diagnostics, companionship, and situational analysis. Wait, what? Neural tissue regulation? You're thinking for me? He asked in a panic. No. I couldn't help but laugh. My neural tissue regulation function allows me to treat and prevent certain mental illnesses and brain damage. It also allows me to interact with you like this. The subject thought about this for a moment. These thoughts were scattered and lit up all sorts of neurons. Can't quite read his mind, yet. I'll work on that. The orcs seemed to be giving him time to sort everything out, but according to my facial recognition software, it was obvious they were concerned and had questions of their own. What about your inactive secondary functions? He finally asked. Well, I'm not sure, I replied truthfully. I know that I should be able to communicate with a central hub and with other users, but that doesn't seem to be working. There's also corrupted files here and there. And I don't have access to the main database, so I don't know anything except what's in my local knowledge base. Okay, what's in your local knowledge base? I took a second to check. About 376 terabytes of information regarding anatomy, physiology, language, and other information regarding my primary function. That's a lot of information. You're sure there's nothing about how we got to where we are now? I'm sure. Okay, he thought. Are you able to move my body without my consent? Good question. I tried to earlier, so I feel like I should be able to... Oh, there it is. A procedure to do exactly that. Yes, but not while you're conscious. I couldn't do it earlier, but that's because I didn't have full access to our hardware, I happily explained. Then I realized his most likely reaction to this information. Don't worry, it's a survival function. I feel no urge to move you unless we're likely to die. That's, well, okay, I guess. How did I get on the altar then? He asked. I don't know. I might have been in survival mode. I genuinely don't remember anything before you got on the altar. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Sure, he answered hesitantly. Is your name Nick or Subject Zero? My name is Nick. Understood, thank you. I'll change your name on the registration, I said as I did just that, Nick. Not a terrible name. I felt a little flush of embarrassment as I realized that I introduced myself as 10 for no reason. That embarrassment faded as I realized I actually preferred 10 over Tenzing. Then it returned when I realized that he hadn't said anything about the pun. Maybe he didn't get it. Regardless, I'm sure my creators had their reasons for naming me Tenzing, but there's no significance for me. 10, on the other hand, is the first pun I've ever made. A very fitting pun at that, like it was predestined. I'll continue to go by 10 then. Nick relayed the information I had given him to the orcs as a question began to bother me. Who created me in the first place? I scanned everything I could, trying desperately to find an answer. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a single hint of the name of my creators. That's concerning, and not just for me. Nick seems just as confused as I am at all of this, so I'm certain not having the answer to this question is going to bother him. Hopefully he doesn't ask. Who made you and put you in my head? Nick asked. Fuck. I was just trying to find the answer to that very question, I replied. I have no idea, I'm sorry. I countered the sudden rush of epinephrine that indicated a panic setting in. I may not be able to treat the causes of Nick's anxiety, but I can keep him lucid. No panic attacks on my watch. Ask it about this writing, one of the orcs said. Okay, Nick replied and pointed at the side of the casket. 10. What type of writing is this, and what does it say? I examined the writing on the fixer casket and came to a horrifying conclusion. That's not a fixer casket. It would appear that it has similar functions, but it doesn't match the specs I have on file. To top it off, the writing was foreign to me as well. What the hell is going on here? I'm sorry, Nick, I don't know what that writing says. I can only read human languages and gone. That's neither. I tried to mask my concerns. It says it can only read human languages and gone, and it doesn't recognize this language, Nick told the orcs. The two orcs wearing robes looked at each other with wide eyes. Then they looked back at Nick. It took them a bit to formulate what they wanted to say. Gone is a precursor language to Orcish, Elvish, and Dwarven, said the bald one. There are very few people left who can speak or read Gone, and that's because it was last used regularly about 4,000 years ago. So that machine is either very old or was meant to act as a research aid of some sort, the other one added. There are other possibilities, I informed Nick. Hold on, Nick verbalized. What other possibilities? Well, it's possible that whoever or whatever made me was unaware that Gone was a dead language. The translator database is a mess, almost like someone was trying to correct mistakes. Gone's the only written language I have, but I have verbalized language packets titled Orcish, Gnomish, Elvish, Drow, Daimon, Dracon, Dwarven, and Anilish. There aren't timestamps, so I can't refute the robed orc's hypothesis. But if I was 4,000 years old, it would be unlikely that I would be able to translate for you. Nick went back to chatting with the orcs, and I saved images of the text in case I needed them later. The room we were in offered very little in the way of clues regarding my origin, but data is always good. I caught a glance at Nick's reflection in the mirrored walls. Interesting, not aesthetically displeasing. Not sure how I'd feel if my host was ugly. Would that negatively impact my mental health? It might increase my workload depending on how insecure the host was about their features. Okay, so to recap, we found out that Nick has a machine in his head and that the text on the caskets is most likely Dracon, a female orc said with an air of authority. The objects in this room also seem to be pretty technologically advanced. That sound about right? The other orcs nodded. All right, we have a mission to get to. We'll escort you three to the crossway, she continued. Wait, Nick said. 10, are you able to boost my combat abilities? A very interesting, if not somewhat alarming question. I checked my systems, and the answer had absolutely no ambiguity. It was almost like it was what I was made for. Yes, I am.